Um, Welcome everyone to the first meeting of 2025. So I'm going to MC the meeting today and facilitate. So first reminder, this meeting is recorded and we archive their recordings. You can find them on the OpenLineage wiki page where we kept the history of the meetings. And if people want to refer to conversation or presentation that have been made, they can find them there. So if you don't wish to be recorded, now is a good time to be aware of this. We start the meeting by going around the room and do a quick introduction. And also, this is a good time to mention if there's a topic you want to discuss at the end. We always keep time at the end of the meeting for open discussion. If there's anything, any PR, bug, feedback you need or something. So I'll call out people on my screen in the order I see them. And so if you can just say your name, I don't know, quick where you work, what you're interested in, and if there's any open topic you're interested in. So the first on my screen is Mache.
Hey, I'm Maciej. I'm a software engineer at Getting Data and TSC member, and I will talk today a bit about Airflow integration.
Next on my screen is myself. I'm Julian. I'm at Datadog. I'm the OpenLineage project lead, and today I'm interested in seeing the two presentations we have on the agenda. Next is Daniel.
Hi everyone, Daniel Rolls, or Dan Rolls, founder of BerryNode, and I think I'm speaking in a little bit, so I'll give myself a bit more of an introduction there.
Welcome. Next is Michael.
Hi, Michael Robinson, TSC member and contributor for a few years to OpenLineage. Until recently, I didn't have as much time to contribute though, so it's good to have the chance to get caught up on what's happening in the project. And that's why I'm here.
Nice to see you. Next is Leo.
Yeah, hi, Leo Godin from New Relic, and I'm a data engineer working with OpenLineage for our own observability.
Nice. And last but not least, Shiri.
Hi, I am Shiri Cabral. I do product at Capital One Software, and I am a TSC member, so I'm just interested in everything OpenLineage.
Nice. So we'll move to the next bit. So this one reminds of where to find information and what's the best way to interact with the community. The main mean of communication is the OpenLineage Slack that you can join and connect and ask questions and so on. And most of the communication happens there. We also have mailing lists, mainly for announcement, wiki, Twitter account, LinkedIn group, the YouTube channel where video gets posted, and the Mastodon account. And we don't have a Blue Sky account yet, I guess. It's fine. So main mean of communication is Slack, and otherwise announcement go on the other mediums. So today we'll go over the recent releases quickly. We have one, the 1.26.0. Then we have two presentations, one about data and information observability by Daniel, who just introduced himself, and a second one about OpenLineage in Airflow 3 by Maciej, we just heard about. So I'll start with, and then we finish with open discussion. So even if you haven't mentioned anything at the beginning and something comes up in your mind during the meeting, feel free to chime in at the end and say, hey, let's discuss this. So recent releases, as of recently, we have the OpenLineage 126 version that got released. There are a few interesting things. Were added in DBT, consuming the DBT structure logs and report progress in real time. So before OpenLineage would have to wait until the whole DBT project, meaning all the models had finished running, to be able to report on their execution. And this had the ability to know as each of the model progresses on where we at. So this is an interesting update. The Java client, so that's by MayCB. The Java client adds a few features related to the transport and customizing how information is being sent from Pavel. The Spark integration now is taking into account the scan report and commit reports that are dealing when dealing with iceberg tables. So getting a lot more metadata about how the iceberg metadata is being used. So that's useful to identify, potential performance or optimization that could be done in data access. And the last one is adding support for DuckDB. So that was also by Pavel. And the last one is in DBT adding support for the DuckDB adapter by Mache. And so this is nice also when using DuckDB and having the ability to see lineage. And some other changes and fix that are being done in also part of this release.
Hey, Julian.
Yeah.
I know that in documentation, we went to a place where you can have the versions in a pull down, but the releases only go up to 1.22.0, no matter what version of the pull down I'm in. I can share my screen if that makes it easier.
Yeah, are you referring to the GitHub page or
If
something?
you 121,
The blog page,
we
the
don't
docs
have,
page.
we don't have like version docs for older versions than 121 because it's when we added doc versioning. So
Yeah, let me,
it will only...
Okay. Yeah, let me stop sharing and you can share.
Okay.
Screen. Yeah.
Okay, can you see about OpenLineage
Yeah.
here? So we've got this version, but when you go to releases, I can't go to the release notes for 1.26.
Okay. So this must have broke, I think, with one of the database changes as a workaround. You can use this page and we'll take a look.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so the GitHub release page is up to date, but somehow the documentation page is broken. Okay, thanks for pointing that out.
So actually, Michael, you were maintaining those releases before. Did you just manually update the page, or is there somehow automation from the GitHub releases?
Are we
I
talking
think
about the
this-
release notes? The release notes?
In the docs.
Yeah, that was manual.
Okay, so that's that nothing broke.
Okay.
I just didn't paste them yet.
That's fine.
I thought it's automatic. I didn't look at this part, right? Yeah.
That's fine. I can link in the wiki page. I can link to the GitHub instead of the documentation release notes.
Okay. Thank you for pointing that out, and we'll figure out a way to fix this. So the next item in the meeting is the data and information observability by Daniel. Daniel, do you want to share your screen?
Yeah, however you would like to do. I'm happy to share if that's helpful.
I think it's easier, right? So that way you can move your slides.
Yeah, sure, no problem at all.
Yourself, and then I can take over when you're finished.
Yeah, no problem at all. Just give me 30 seconds then.
And after that, we'll have Mathieu's presentation about the Airflow 3. And I think, Daniel, you have been talking with Harel. Harley is sorry he cannot be here today because he's been traveling.
Yeah, no, he's been very, very kind. He's given me some guidance. So hopefully we hit the spot.
Here we go.
Is everybody able to see that and hear me and see me at the same time?
Yep.
Perfect. Perfect. So just before I jump in to the presentation, probably just do a little bit of introduction. So I think I've been attending these meetings for about 6 months now, and I've had a few conversations with people, but let me just give a little bit of a broader introduction. So hi, everybody. Thank you very much for giving me a slot and welcoming me to the community for the last couple of months. So Dan Rolfs, founder and CEO of Berry Node. I come at this with, as you can see from the grey hair, way too many years of experience. I've been at this about 25 years now, and the first part of that career was spent in-house doing data and tech for a real estate investments business. And then for the last sort of 15 years has really been consulting predominantly to financial services and pretty much all around data and analytics operating models, working with chief data officers, chief data and analytics officers, and particularly, hopefully that's part of the theme that will come out today, is a lot of risk teams looking at data risk and cyber risk within financial institutions. So that's professionally. Academically, I undergraduate in computer science, finance and economics from Sydney University, a master's degree from Birkbeck College, London University, and an MBA from London Business School. Personally, live just outside London in Buckinghamshire with a wife, 2 kids, and a dog named Lily. And then when I'm not doing all that, I volunteer. I sit on the board of a financial literacy and debt advice charity called Crosslight. So that's me. In terms of an agenda, and completely happy to adjust this as we go through, but just going to flag some potential topics of discussion. And then I was going to come back to those. So when we get through the framework presentation and the case study of 239, and I was going to come back to those, but I was just going to flag them on the way through to plant some seeds for people to start thinking. Then I was going to go into the case study and then the framework as we see it. So hopefully that's okay for everybody. And just to flag those potential areas of discussion. So, areas of potential collaboration with the OpenLineage community and some of the potential stakeholders like banks and regulators. And we'll come into this a little bit more detail in a moment, but there were 3 areas, and certainly the first one is probably where we dig into most in this presentation, but there was just whether we can use the OpenLineage standard to standardize some of those regulatory reporting requirements in 239, which I think we touched on a couple of meetings ago when we said I might come back and present, and I'll go into a bit of detail. Unstructured data. So some of the conversations I'm having with clients right now are around lineage of unstructured data, so particularly feeding LLMs. And then a value-aligned data set consumption type event tracking. So they were just 3 potential ideas of discussion. So we'll come back to those in due course. But I want to jump into a case study around BCBS 239. So as per my introduction, I've been at this sort of 15 years. And for those that aren't familiar with it, it almost doesn't matter whether you're familiar with 239 and the specifics of it. But in the essence of it, it's about making sure that board risk committees, so at the very top of the governance structure of a bank, has the right data to take decisions on with regards to the risk profile of a bank. Right? So that's, it's all very, very specific and technical beyond that, around three lines of defense models, et cetera, But the essence of BCBS 239, which was founded launched by the Bank of International Settlements, is that, and Banking Committee, is that board risk committees must have the right information. And my experience of that starts from the earliest days. So BCBS is 10 years old, and the BIS, Bank of International Settlements, just launched their paper last November, I think it was, or the November before, around the 12 months anniversary, sorry, the 10-year anniversary, decade anniversary. And the news is not good. Right? There's 12 core principles that banks need to align to, and only 2 of those banks, and these aren't Barry-Node data, I just want to be clear, these are quoted directly from the report by the BIS, Bank of International Settlements. Only 2 out of the 31 that are fully compliant, right? And our view is at Barry-Node that that's really been a failure of traditional governance, right? And I've worked on those programs, right? So I was helping write those policies and putting in the controls in place back a decade ago, working with banks. And we really see it as a failure of traditional governance approach, because we all said data governance is the answer, right? And of course, observability wasn't a big thing back then. So we all said data governance was the answer. We'll write policies and comply. And it really hasn't worked out that way. And we think it's time for a different approach, and hence I founded Barry-Node, and hence I started joining this community, right? We need to bring a much more observability view to this, as well as, and we're not saying for a second that data governance is not relevant, we're absolutely critical, but with much more integrated view. So that really started my journey over the last 12 months since founding Barry-Node. I've probably attended, well, a large number of meetups, hanging a lot around the observability community, so the actual software and infrastructure observability and the site reliability engineering teams, etc. I've attended a lot of meetups and read a lot of books around how they do it, and started to try and think how we can do it, and joining these meetings and trying to bring that observability thinking. So as a result, what's our definition of observability? It's slightly broader than what we see as the SRE guys, right? So reliability engineers or the open OTel guys. Our definition is much more around, it's the body of knowledge and practices and capabilities, be able to measure the capability to deliver the data and information as it is needed by the organization, and to drive value for it. So again, I don't want to spend a lot of time on that, because I think this community gets that. But how do we think about it and how do we structure it? So the work we've been doing is on the outside in the blue, right? So they're the capabilities we've been building, because the earthy colors inside is somewhat of a solved problem. So again, I won't be telling this community anything when I talk about Dharma or DCAM or the CDMC, also from the EDMC. So that center bit, the earthy bit, is, for somewhat solved. It's the bit around the outside that we've been thinking about, and how do you integrate observability with those traditional data management and data governance frameworks and bring them together, right, and align them. And unsurprisingly, we've even thought down to which metrics are required by which capabilities. So you'll notice that the govern capability in observability is aligned with comply and govern, with which are the traditional capabilities within the Dharma framework and the DCAM framework. And same goes for value. Right? So why did we think that there's plenty of frameworks out there? So why did we think another one was required? Well, we wanted to focus in on value. So we've actually started with what is the organizational value of the data, and thought about it from there. As I said, my undergraduate degree was actually in computer science, finance, and economics. So I always take an economic view of the data assets and data information assets. So I start with, how do you manage an asset? Once I've understood that, what is the supply and demand for that asset? And then from there, everything should flow. So we've actually started with value, and that's one of the gaps that we saw in traditional frameworks. So we've identified about 150 metrics spread across 72 capabilities, about 600 odd requirements. And how have we structured that is in core capabilities, foundational capabilities, and then adjacent. So what we've tried not to do is duplicate, right? So things like risk management, which we'll come back to with BCBS 239, we didn't see that you needed to duplicate risk management within a data and information observability or an asset management framework. Many of the organizations like banks, utilities, etc., already have a large risk management and complex risk management organization, so we shouldn't duplicate. But what we have done is broken out the core capabilities from the adjacent capability, or foundational capabilities, I should say. So we've put capabilities such as the OpenLineage release services and Marquez and all the platforms around connect, collect, alert, store, and analyze. They deploy those capabilities, but it's the actual organizational capabilities to drive value from that data, discover it, track it, comply with it, and then govern it. And sorry, guys, I'm going through quite quickly because I want to go back to Q&A. So we'll pause for questions in a second. So what we've done is really look to align and integrate the traditional thinking of Dharma and DCAM and all those great frameworks to a data and information observability framework. So we've really thought about how you map, how does information and data observability map onto and support each one of the traditional capabilities, such as, and we'll talk about in a second, if you think about compliance, well, bottom left-hand corner of the comply, the monitoring of the legal compliance is something that we really need to do and help with observability. Right? Same goes for, and our difference between comply and govern is that governs those internal policies. So how do you monitor policy compliance, internal compliance? So that's why the Euler diagram comes together and shows the overlaps of those capabilities to make sure that we're not duplicating all the good work that's out there at the moment around Dharma, DCAM, and all those traditional data management frameworks. Just wanted to flag, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I just want to flag it hasn't been just me, right? So I don't want to take credit for the 72 capabilities, 150 metrics, and 600 requirements. We've had guys and girls like ex-CDOs of large telcos, etc., helping me define that and work through it. So there's some of the team that's helped me work through that. Let me pause there and thank you very much. I wanted to get through that to set the sort of conversation. Now I should pause and for questions, comments. I've gone through it quite quickly.
How do you manage?
What are the?
Okay,
Go
should
ahead.
we go?
No, go ahead, Maciej.
So I think the traditional approach is very manual in banks and institutions like that, right? So how do you manage like automation that OpenLineage, to combine this approach with automation that OpenLineage provides?
Yes,
and of course that.
Exactly. So yes, I agree, and that's exactly one of the problems we've got to solve, right? Like, how do we automate that lineage with adoptions of tools like Marquez and Datadog, etc. Right? We've really got to work out, because 10 years ago, how did we do it? We went and interviewed 20 stakeholders and found out how the data flow works, right? Now we've got to work out a way to discover it, right? What is it actually happening? And then track and manage it as we move through. So there's one thing about discovering it in the first instance and then tracking it as it changes through time. For instance, like OpenLineage and the tracking of schema changes, right? That happens all the time. So there's one thing about discovery, but the next thing is about tracking the changes over time. And funny enough, to your point, discovery is one thing, but to your point, part of the findings in the BIS report, and certainly my experience of working with clients, you can go and build all the lineage documentation, and then sure enough, somebody changes an underlying data set and schema, and it's broken again. Right? So how do you track and manage that and maintain it? And that's one of the findings by the BIS report, and certainly my finding as well, is that maintaining it is non-trivial. Sherry, you had a question?
You answered my question, so
Perfect.
Good.
I feel that's the hardest part, right? That's like combining manual and automatic approach, because both can introduce bugs, feel. And second is that like aligning the like not the bug, but maybe if you try to correct some mistake, right? You don't have a good way to do this in the like OpenLineage automatic collection, right? You can't
Yep.
tell that this data set should be really something else when it tries to do the same thing over and over. So yeah, some layer between would be useful.
Yeah,
I think.
agreed. And that's, yeah, agreed. Agreed 100%.
I think one of the challenges I've seen from talking to a couple of banks is there's a large amount of just custom code, right? Like custom frameworks and things. And OpenLineage provides a lot of visibility when you're using like the standard tools that a lot of people are using, whether it's SQL or Spark or things like that. And when you have large amount of various ways of dealing with data and implementing data flows and so on, it becomes a little more difficult, right? So is
Yeah,
this
but
something you're
that's
seeing?
Yeah, I absolutely. I think you're right, Julian. And some of these institutions are 200 years old, right? So you can imagine the technical debt and legacy systems, etc., right, that are in there. So custom systems, legacy system, DB2 backend type stuff, right? Like, where some of these are still running mainframe. And deploying in a cloud native environment where you can set all this up from scratch versus, and observability is almost built in, right? Versus back then when you're dealing with legacy solutions, which doesn't out of the box consider observability. So yes, agreed, and it's even more complicated than what you say, right? Like it's legacy systems plus internal developed plus vendors plus multiple vendors plus multi-cloud, right? Because you've got multiple cloud vendors in there as well. So the complexity, because we're talking about big institutions, right? So there's multi-cloud and multi-jurisdictional. So you've got data jurisdiction type challenges as well. So yeah,
I'll
it's pretty
also
complicated.
I'll also say that having worked with Lineage customers, including banks, but also, and now working for a bank, and also insurance companies and retail and technology companies, that I think there will always be manual code. I think that companies that are complex enough to need Lineage, whether it's because of regulations, right? There's no such thing as like a simple bank. At least not from the back end, maybe from the consumer side there is. Any entity, we can call this Cabral's law if you'd like, any entity sufficiently complex enough to need Lineage will probably have some, handwritten, code or some bash script that FTPs copies files over. And even if everybody used a vendor tool, there's, the modern data stack is huge, right? So I think that instead of saying we're going to automate everything all the time, I think that having a solution like, we'd look at telemetry solutions. And yeah, a lot of the cloud vendors have built-in telemetry, but there are also projects everywhere adding open telemetry to everything. And I think that the equivalent of open telemetry in OpenLineage is the client libraries. So I think that instead of trying to get to a world where every single vendor has OpenLineage, which they should, I think that it's that and knowing the importance, right? Like nowadays, nobody writes code without new code without adding telemetry, and people are going back and adding open telemetry to their existing code. And I'd like to see that happen for Lineage as well. So that's my 2 cents on that.
No, I agree. And one of my inspirations, and I'm going to mispronounce his surname, so I'm not going to do it. Daniel from Skyscanner did an amazing presentation, which you should be able to find on YouTube, with what they've done at Skyscanner around adoption of OTel. And his whole position has always been open standards, not necessarily open source. And I'm a big fan of open source, right? I'm about to show my age, but I was running a Red Hat instance on my PC when I was at university in the late 90s, right? It was a big fan of open source, but we can't necessarily assume that everybody wants to go open source all the time, right? And I think those open standards, and again, why I'm partly excited about the OpenLineage movement, right? If we can stay with open standards and let the vendors choose or not choose, or the banks choose or not choose how they deploy, what their architecture is, but everybody subscribes to the standard, right? Then it doesn't matter that they're multi-cloud, doesn't matter that they have legacy solutions, doesn't matter. We can still see the lineage. And if I keep going back to the context of 239, part of the challenge they have is that sharing exactly the challenge you talked about, right? Like this project, that schema change. Even once you deploy a solution, it's broken in 6 months because somebody's changing something. So if we get everybody to subscribe to the open standard, then we're good.
Can you say more?
Preaching to the converted on that one in this room.
So I'm looking at what we might want to actually discuss, or what you're asking of the community, and you have a lot on this slide. So I'm just going to take topic area 1 and community value 1, right? So it seems like in the topic area of, hey, how do we standardize financial data lineage events? Can we come up with open standards for risk data flows? And I think that the OpenLineage community as a whole is not a subject matter in expert in industry, in any one particular industry. We have a lot of different industries represented, and I think maybe we're subject matter experts in the tech industry, but certainly not bank regulations or anything like that. But you are a subject matter expert in that, having written some of these rules. So why don't we connect offline and see, or maybe do you have an idea of what do you have in mind, or like how would you standardize a risk data flow?
Yeah, and I think there's probably a step before that, Sherry, is what do we mean when we say standardized flow? Like there's a standard conversation, first of all, and I think even before that, there's a community conversation, right? So and the offer is, I would be happy to have a conversation, talking to these CDOs regularly and their teams. I think the first question is we need to ask the user community, the community that's actually needs to comply with this regulation. Is this something that you'd be interested in supporting and joining? Now, my hypothesis is that they would be, but I wanted to bring it to this community first and say, is this something we're interested in taking to them, right? So I think there's probably a conversation before that. And I think it's almost, Sherry, it's not for us to say yet. I think there's a bunch of experience in this room and a bunch of knowledge in this room certainly influence that. But I think there's there's at least a tri-party conversation, at least tri-party, that is this group, this community, the user community, so the banks that have to comply with 32 banks, and potentially the vendors, but maybe the regulators. I don't know which goes first. I haven't worked that out yet and think that's part of this conversation. So I think there's a couple of open questions there. And I think that my ask right now is, are we up for exploring one? And I appreciate the slides quite dense, but I didn't want to come with one because I wanted to be led by the community about what they were most passionate and interested in. And again, I'm happy to distribute the slides and for everybody to go away and have a think, and we can come back in our next meeting and take a decision. Again, I'll leave it up to the community how they want to decide on that.
Yeah, so
right.
Sorry, I've slightly dodged your question, Cheryl.
No, this
there's
is
a
perfect.
question before your question, if you know what I mean, because I don't think we can jump to the answer yet. Sorry.
Right.
So one thing I wanted to add is, so I know that there are already some banks that are using OpenLineage to help with BCBS 239 specifically, right? And there are some features that have been added, like column level lineage, that came directly from banks using OpenLineage for this purpose, and then needing support for column level lineage for that purpose. And so there I think it's definitely very applicable to that use case, and people are already doing it. And also OpenLineage is on purpose very extensible, right? And there's this notion of facet where you can facet as a self-contained piece of metadata with their own schema, when you can start describing certain aspect of the data you want to capture in the metadata, right? And adding this. And I think, to me, probably some of those discussions end up being, okay, we need to describe more specifically certain aspects, right, of the data that are important, like column level lineage or other things, right? Like in other cases, people who care more about the privacy regulation, like GDPR, they care more about, oh, is this column sensitive information, right? Or PII or things like that. And so this is typically the way this goes, right? So I think, yes, the community is very happy to help those use cases. And I think you're very welcome to contribute by saying, hey, we're missing that facet. This needs to be more well-defined. And we can see how this can be more integrated in various data transformation tooling so that they provide this metadata. I think that makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah.
And Julian, do you think, first of all, it's great to hear. In my conversations around the market in Europe, I haven't had that conversation. So if that's happening in Europe, or it's not one of the conversations I've had in Europe so far, that's fantastic news that we're already got some adoption. Do you think that there's a working group, and I don't know whether that's the right word, of those banks that are adopting, that would benefit from establishing a sort of working group? I don't know whether that's the right word, but some sort of team, task force, I don't know what the right word is, to collaborate on that?
Not that I know of. I think it'd be great that someone led that. I know of like one-off, discussion and people making an effort, but I don't know of a working group where people collaborate on like, common goals. But you could. I think in the past we've tried, creating a Slack channel specifically around this, but someone needs to be animating that community and make sure people get something out of it so that they're incentivized to keep coming in the discussion. But I think, yeah, that'd be great. I think that'd be great if this existed.
Good. And I guess I'm more than happy. In my conversations in the next couple of weeks, I'm happy to float the idea with banks I'm talking to and data teams and risk teams, right? I think there's a conversation with the second line function, certainly in non-financial risk teams. But I guess my ask would be the same. If people are having those conversations, is that something that would be worthwhile for them to get involved in?
Yeah, I think I don't know, if you want to organize some kind of group that kind of clarify the use cases around, bank regulation, compliance, and how OpenLineage can help. And, that's very valuable contributions to the community, right? We could have a documentation page that explains, hey, how you use OpenLineage for BCBS 239 compliance. Or, just driving consensus on what facets should be added to the spec and things like that. I think that's be very valuable to the community. And the way an open source project is led, or this kind of open source, open standard, is really, we want the people in the community to take the initiative and lead consensus around a specific domain, right? Like if you care more about bank regulation, you're welcome to take the lead and add more metadata around this and contribute that. If you care more about, like GDPR, if you care more about observability, data reliability, right? There's a bunch of areas that plug around OpenLineage, and OpenLineage is designed to, this notion of facet is by design trying to enable smaller group of people to focus on the areas, the domains they care about, right? Without having too much bottleneck on decision making.
And it turns
Right, and
out
then
adding
from
facets
there-
is really easy.
Yes, and from there we could, if there were changes needed in the core that weren't either a custom facet, or we decided that this was important enough to be a core facet, then we can do a proposal to the community and then get it in front of the technical steering committee, and the technical steering committee will discuss and vote. But yeah, that's one of the beautiful things about open is it's open, you can take it and run with it. But I also love that you wanted to like come to us and say, hey, you know, who would be great to take this and run with it?
Yeah. So on this, I think we need, so Machi has the other presentation, and I want to make sure we're not cutting me short. So probably we should transition to the next topic. But thank you very much, Daniel. And I think, yes, this is very on point and this is very welcome. And, you know, you're welcome to do a follow-up some other meeting, or like, I think in Slack is also a great place to start this discussion and so on. Thank you.
Thank you for the time. Thank you for having me.
Machi, do you want to share your screen and take over for the following? Yeah, okay.
I can sit. So
Let's go.
I just want to, I will try to do a quick update on what's happening in Airflow right now, OpenLineage in Airflow. So yeah, this is like our work in progress. There's no guarantee that all I say will be finished or will be in like 3.0 release. So basically Airflow 3 is like the biggest change, I think the biggest release in Airflow history, like the rewrite of core assumptions underneath. And this affects OpenLineage a lot. I will try to spare you the good details, but the Airflow architecture looked like everything connected to the database, communication via database, and Airflow 3 very much tries to break with this pattern of like sharing DB as communication module. So this kind of affects OpenLineage integration, right? Because we also use this mechanism to get some data from Airflow. And we kind of made the mechanism that OpenLineage depends on also require this database connection. So all of this needs like plumbing, right? It's like a plumbing fix. You replace one interface with another, fix some of the issues. It's not very user-facing, right? But it also has some benefits for users because it enables us to disentangle logging in this place. So if right now we try to not log very much if something OpenLineage related stuff breaks, because this is like visible for the users on their main path. Like if they look at their task, it's failing or not failing, and they see some OpenLineage messages, they might think it's OpenLineage is causing something to break, when usually very, very much is not the case. But then if the OpenLineage logs are separate, then they can like look at those logs when they have issues with OpenLineage and not bother with them when they want to just take a look at their tasks, right? So this support for this already is in the PR. More work is to be done for it to work a great way. But this like feature, this entanglement of database and communication will have some other benefits. I will talk at the few slides in the future. Second feature is like notifications from web server. Right now, you can click on the Airflow UI manually, mark some tasks as successful failed. This would not report OpenLineage tasks in Airflow 2, just because the architectural reasons. There are a few places where those operations happen. The database, it was possible to add, but it was very late in Airflow 2 cycle when this was kind of issue for some of the consumers. And with Airflow 3, this is all getting also rewritten, replaced. There is new API server that will have the integration for day one. And actually today, one of the PRs that was adding this support was merged. So yeah, it's going good on this front. And like this scope is very far over Airflow 3. So multiple items are already planned for future releases, like more of this task SDK. Due to this division, we can provide in future asynchronous version of OpenLineage Listener. So right now it needs to work on worker, exactly as it was before. But if we don't depend on the database connection, we can serialize some of this like metadata that was collected on the worker, and schedule like event emission to happen asynchronously on some different component. And this allows us to like do multiple asynchronous calls to collect more database more like dataset information. For example, call the database, gather the information schema, call, for example, BigQuery API, got more information about the columns. Right now, we try to not do this thing because we are in like a synchronous path in Airflow. So doing too much would be a significant overhead for like small tasks, fast running, and this is just not feasible, right? There is dataset asset integration in Airflow 2 already, but it's getting significantly more powerful in Airflow 3. And one of those issues is partitioning. So Airflow 3.1 or some other future version will have an option to explicitly define partitioning scheme for some data set and then schedule some work on it, right? So this very well ties to like work that Paweł Leszczyński, who couldn't be here today, is doing on partitioning. I recommend you to take a look at the proposal. It's already been kind of far in the review cycle. And I think it's very important aspect of like data observability to have good support for partitioning. So I would love if everyone who has some knowledge about this topic would give some feedback from Paweł. And hopefully we'll have this feature done in OpenLineage and we'll be able to take the Airflow assets support and deliver some value out of them. And another thing is like the one that I have least idea how it will work right now. This is like the idea, not some implementation, nothing about it. The Airflow will be able to be event driven with AAP82. And this allows like A4 users or some developers to provide a bit of code that could potentially give Airflow some information when to run something, right? So you can define somebody can define a, let's say, trigger that would take a look at a given S3 bucket and emit some events when, for example, file appear there or like are modified. And then Airflow would be able to utilize that and basically schedule some stuff around it. And OpenLineage should be able to notify that something like this happened, right? Like the file has appeared in S3 bucket. So this is, additional something that can be possible in Airflow 3. And I think that's the very short version of what's happening right now. So,
would that support like what you're talking about there, possibly SNS as well?
Sure, like everything, pretty much everything can be queried, let's say.
Whatever talks to the API, we should be able to grab.
Yeah, with like reasonable, right? Bounds. Something like consuming. There were some attempts of like doing Kafka-driven Airflow, writing an operator that consumes Kafka event, Kafka like message, does something based on it, but it was very cumbersome, right? And now that there is like some crucial piece of abstraction being worked on, it's actually done by Vincent Beck from AWS. So I think SNS is very much on their plate, right? You define some abstraction that somebody can define like trigger for SNS, S3, whatever, and then you can tell your DAG to use this to watch this particular system for messages, right?
It feels like OpenLineage has been developed for specifically my needs over the last month, and what's coming on is so many things.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, we have iceberg metrics. Nice.
So yeah, if we don't have much questions to Airflow or about Airflow stuff, we can go to, I think, open discussion. And I have the first question actually to you. So we have merged the tag facet that you've been working on, tag facet definition. And what are the next steps? Like, what do you want to do with it? Like, is there something that you want to be supported?
So I was going to put a proposal in for DBT, how to handle, because tags are going to be very specific to an integration, or in each integration has to determine how it's going to get tags, right? So I'll put a proposal in for DBT. I think we have to think of, like, the way I envisioned it, say you know, some of the tags you could set by environment variables. Like, for instance, let's say we'll take DBT just because it's an easy example. We're scheduling a DBT job, and you're using a Kubernetes operator. So, you're using bash commands to run it. Having an environment variable saying this job is in the production environment and part of the billing pipeline would be pretty useful, right? Then within DBT itself, they have a concept of tags, but they also have metadata. And then Airflow, like, we'll need a different proposal for how we're going to implement tags. Like, would they be tags on a task, right? Because an Airflow task is a job, and so I think like the next step is determining for each integration, how are we going to do it?
Yeah. And we talked about two like aspects, right? One is those integration specific tags, and one is like override that user can do.
Yeah.
From basically on the client perspective.
On the client, which I was thinking environment variables would handle that. And when it gets to something like Spark, I don't have much experience with Spark, so I'm not sure I'll be able to add much to the conversation.
In Spark, you can add parameters to the Spark context or something. Would be, I think, typically how people do it. So similar mechanism, you add key values to the Spark context, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's perfect. That's what we're collecting, key values.
So I think that would be a good way to do this. Yeah.
So I could start with a proposal for DBT just to get that started, and something I know really well and have strong opinions on.
And if we have this user-defined tags, where would you attach them to, like, particular run? Because it's kind of hard to define the data set if even possible, right?
Yeah. So I think user-defined tags are job and or run, or job. It's really job and or run. Like, I could see having a run have a tag of ad hoc equals true. Like, okay, this wasn't our scheduled, so I had to rerun this to troubleshoot something. Like that could be a useful tag, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even like scheduled equals true, which is kind of like the default you've set your environment for, but when you run it manually, you set it to ad hoc. But yeah, on a data set, I don't really see any way any reasonable way we would even want user defined tags. And when you say user defined, you mean overrides, right?
Yes, something that's not taken from the integration itself, right?
Yeah.
Like,
and so, maybe if we use environment variables, because those were added recently, you could have an environment variable like, olin underscore job underscore tag name equals something. Olin underscore tag underscore run underscore tag name equals something. Like that's basically how we use those environment variables today.
yeah.
Nice.
So I could put a proposal for that as well.
Yeah, I think that would make
Yeah.
sense. I think that's the first time I hear the usage of all in as a short for
Oh.
OpenLineage. I think it makes sense, like hotel all in, I guess.
That's
No,
why
that's
that I hadn't talked to anyone when I started researching OpenLineage, and we use OTel quite a bit. So I just assumed it was Olin, and I found out it's actually OL, right?
yeah, but maybe it will stick. Who knows? We'll see what happens.
It will at New
Well,
Relic
an
because all my
OL
docs have Olin.
OL could be too close to hotel. You know what I mean? If you're listening from an audio perspective.
Yeah.
So instead of
Olin.
OL and hotel, it could be hotel and Olin. Very different.
Do you want me to put a
It's
proposal
also-
in?
No, yeah, it's also easier to say. I think it can be a very short proposal.
Thank you. So we have reached the end of our time, and personally, I have to go. So I'll say goodbye and thank you all for joining. And yes, please follow up, open your proposal, like a ticket, or chime in on the Slack channel. And we'll see you next time, and see you on Slack.
Happy New Year.
Bye, everyone.
Happy New Year.
Happy
Thank
New
you.
Year. Bye-bye.